This is the story of a national park so full of life, so impossibly rich with wildlife, that scientists in the 1960s ranked its wildlife densities alongside the Serengeti and the Ngorongoro crater. And then, over 15 years of civil war, nearly everything in it was killed. Gorongosa National Park sits in central Mozambique, covering 1,500 square miles of mountainsides, plateau forests, palm savannas, and wetlands. To the northwest, Mount Gorongosa rises over 6,000 feet, its forested slopes feeding the rivers and floodplains below, the hydrological heart of the entire ecosystem. In its golden age, the park sheltered 2,600 elephants, 13,000 buffalo, 3,500 hippos, and 200 lions. Hollywood stars like John Wayne, Gregory Peck, and Joan Crawford flew in to sip sundowners at the glamorous Chitengo camp, which had 2 swimming pools, a restaurant, and a bar in the middle of the African bush. This was Africa's Eden, and then Eden burned. Mozambique broke free from Portugal in 1975 and almost immediately tore itself apart. The Civil War ignited in 1977, pitting the ruling Marxist Frelimo government against the Rhodesia-backed RENAMO rebels. It would grind on for 15 years. An estimated 1 million people died in a country of 14 million, and Gorongosa sat right in the middle of it. RENAMO forces used the park as a base of operations, a refuge hidden inside the wilderness. Both sides treated its wildlife as a resource to be consumed. Soldiers slaughtered elephants for ivory to fund arms purchases, gunned down buffalo, zebra, and wildebeest for meat to feed their troops, and killed the large predators, the lions, for sport. By the time the General Peace Agreement was signed on October 4, 1992, 95% of Gorongosa's large animals were gone. Some species suffered a 99% decline. The hippos that once numbered 3,500 had collapsed to roughly 100. The park had closed to visitors back in 1983, and when the guns finally went silent, what remained was wreckage. But here's where the story takes its turn, because not quite everything died. Lions were the only large carnivore species in Gorongosa that didn't go locally extinct during the war. Surveys taken at the end of the fighting found just six lions in a park that had held 200. They were there, hiding in a landscape that had been transformed around them. With so few large herbivores left to keep the vegetation in check, tree cover across the park increased by 34% between 1977 and 2012. The savanna itself had changed shape. The lions that remained were survivors of something almost no other population on Earth had ever endured. For over a decade after the war ended, Gorongosa drifted. There was no money, no infrastructure, no plan. Then in 2004, an American entrepreneur named Carr showed up. Carr had built his fortune selling voicemail systems to telephone companies and had already founded the Carr Center for Human Rights Policy at Harvard, putting him at the intersection of business, philanthropy, and human welfare long before he turned to conservation. He was searching for a project that combined conservation with human development. Something ambitious enough to be almost unreasonable. It was Mozambique's former president, Joaquim Chissano, who invited Carr to visit the park and see what remained. When he did, he found exactly that. He described the challenge as difficult but doable, and he liked the idea, he said, that it was just on the edge of possible. Between 2004 and 2007, the Carr Foundation poured tens of millions of dollars into restoring the park. In 2008, the Mozambican government and the foundation formalized a 20-year public-private partnership, and Carr would eventually direct over $100 million of his personal funds into the project. Rangers were hired, roads were rebuilt, anti-poaching patrols expanded, and critically, scientists arrived. In 2012, a conservation ecologist named Paula Booley launched the Gorongosa Lion Project. Working alongside Mozambican scientists Selena Diaz and Domingas Alexio, Booley used GPS satellite collars and trail cameras to identify and track individual lions across the park. Between 2012 and 2016, her team counted 104 lions, roughly half the pre-war population. The recovery was real, and it was accelerating. But it wasn't painless. Before 2015, 1/3 of the lions in the park had been captured, mutilated, or killed by snares set by poachers. Bully's commitment deepened after she heard about a mother lioness named Helena and her cub. A couple of months after that, Helena was killed by a snare. Bully gave up a fellowship in California and moved to Gorongosa full-time. She would later say that the lions are sentinels, that when conditions are bad, they suffer the first impact, but when life goes well, they recover quickly. By 2019, the team had documented well over 100 lions across the park with dozens of new cubs. And something else stood out. None of the new males being documented had been caught in traps. The snare problem was being brought under control. That same year, Gorongosa faced a different kind of devastation. Cyclone Idai made landfall in March 2019, one of the most powerful tropical cyclones ever to strike the African continent. It tore through Mozambique, flooding large sections of the park, killing animals, and destroying infrastructure that had taken years to build. The restoration team had to rebuild again, and did. That the park absorbed the blow and kept recovering is itself part of the story. Today, approximately 200 lions roam Gorongosa, supported by veterinary patrols led by Mozambican veterinarians Dr. Antonio Paulo and Dr. Murcia Angela, alongside continuous population monitoring. That number matches the pre-war count. The lions came back, and they didn't come back alone. The first survey after the war, in 1994, found roughly 7,000 animals left in the entire park. The most recent aerial count, in October 2024, documented over 110,000 large animals across 60% of the park, the highest number ever recorded there, and more than were counted during the park's golden age in the 1960s. That's a 15-fold increase in 30 years. Aerial surveys confirmed expanding herds of waterbuck, sable, bush pigs, and buffalo. Waterbuck in particular have become a bellwether species, their numbers closely tracked by researchers as a measure of grassland health, with elephant populations reaching an all-time high and no evidence of poaching or animals caught in snares. In 2018, painted wolves, African wild dogs, a critically endangered species indigenous to the park, were reintroduced. And here's the part that gets overlooked. Reintroductions accounted for only 465 animals across 7 species. Almost all of that recovery was the ecosystem rebuilding itself once the killing stopped. The IUCN, whose red list defines the global standard for species threat status, has noted the park's recoveries as a benchmark case in African conservation. The science infrastructure grew right alongside the wildlife. In 2014, the E.O. Wilson Biodiversity Laboratory opened inside the park, named after the legendary Harvard biologist known as the father of biodiversity, the same E.O. Wilson whose half-Earth vision called for protecting 50% of the planet's land and sea to halt mass extinction. Wilson attended the dedication in person. The lab's team has since recorded and mapped populations of more than 8,000 species of animals and plants, discovering over 100 species entirely new to science. Among them, a new species of blind cavefish found in the limestone karst beneath the park, and several undescribed beetle species identified from Mount Gorongosa's montane forest. In 2025, surveys on Mount Gorongosa documented an increase in pollinator diversity, including rare butterfly species not recorded since the early 1990s. And in 2026, the lab underwent a historic leadership transition, with Mozambican scientist Dr. Jacinto Adriano Mate, a mentee of the outgoing director, taking the helm. That detail matters, because Gorongosa's story isn't just about animals. Nearly 200,000 people live in traditional communities around the park. The project employs 1,700 workers, including nature rangers, and has introduced sustainable products like Gorongosa coffee and Gorongosa honey, providing income for thousands of families. The tension between conservation and community hasn't disappeared, but it's being actively managed. In August 2019, a historic ceremony took place inside the park itself. The leaders of the Mozambican government and the opposition RENAMO party signed a cessation of hostilities accord, designating Gorongosa as a park for peace. The place where armies once butchered wildlife to fuel a war became the place where peace was formally declared. National Geographic has named Gorongosa one of its last wild places, and Paula Bulli has taken what she learned and expanded, co-founding a new restoration project in the Makasa Tambra ecosystem of central Mozambique. Greg Carr once called Gorongosa the best park in the world. That might sound like the kind of thing a benefactor says, but consider what this place has been through, how it went from Africa's Eden to a battlefield to a graveyard, and then somehow to something that exceeds what it was before. The ecosystem recovered, but not symmetrically. Waterbuck now number over 65,000, nearly 6 out of every 10 animals in the park, and roughly 20 times more abundant than before the war. The savanna looks different than it did in the 1960s. This isn't a restoration to some frozen ideal. It's something messier and, honestly, more truthful. A living system finding a new equilibrium after the worst that humans could do to it. 6 lions survived a war. Today, there are 200, in a park where 200 lions once roamed. The same number. But these lions are descendants of the ones who survived, and every single one carries the legacy of that war in its lineage. They're not replacements. They're proof that when you stop destroying something and start protecting it, nature will do the rest.